Grainier feels a little more like a witness. Occasionally he's like in the room for these things, so he's present for them, and perhaps through inaction a bit culpable. In the book, I think there is a little bit more of a sense of culpability of participating in this actively.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, like, his hands are a little dirtier.
Yeah, it's a little harder to take this person as like this righteous person who we see in the film. I don't know that I like it any less, but
Yeah,
it does
it's
fundamentally
just
like change
different.
it. Welcome back, friends, to episode 386 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Clint Bently's 2025 film, Train Dreams. I'm so glad we got a chance to cover this movie. I remember when I saw it originally, I didn't know till I was actually watching it that it was based on a book, but it was one of my favorite movies of 2025. I really was moved by it, and it was just like, man, if we get the chance, if there's any opportunity to cover Train Dreams, that would be awesome. As time has rolled on, more and more people have kind of come to it and talked about it. It got put on Netflix. I think a lot of people saw it there, and then I know your community has talked to you about it some as well, right? Because you're over there in the Pacific Northwest and kind of recommended it.
I've heard some people who recommended it. Yeah, such an interesting film. I feel like I'm still floating with it a little bit. It's kind of a floaty film, and definitely leaves an emotional impression on you when you watch it.
Yeah, it's heavy in like I don't know. I didn't know what to expect of a story that seemed like it was just going to be about like logging or creating railroads and that sort of thing. And I obviously hadn't read the book, which we now have. If you didn't check out last week's episode, go back and check that out if you would, because that's where we talk all about Denis Johnson's original novella, which I thought was excellent and had a ton of fun with, or at least really enjoyed on a rich and deep level. I saw a lot of it's fun. It's fun for like the person in me who loves storytelling, like the person who likes something that feels important. I just got a lot out of it, and saw last week a lot of where, this film got all of that source material. And I was excited to jump back into the film. Just gorgeous filmmaking from this film. Specifically, like the way that they approached it was like very naturalistic, trying to film with like almost exclusively natural light, or like scenes being lit by candlelight. And there's just this intimacy that's brought about by that, and by the authenticity of the characters, like how these characters feel so real, and that they don't have these like archetypes. They're all searching for things as well. Like it feels so true to life in that way. And I think that really, based on a lot of the performances, the direction of Clint Bently, who I thought, I wasn't super familiar with his work. I haven't seen Jockey, but I've heard great things about it, which was like kind of what put him on the map, at least for American audiences. I felt like this was such a powerful film, and I looked at the Oscar contenders, because this was nominated, and I just remember looking through, and there's just a lot of like really strong voices and really interesting films, but this one felt like it's in the same camp as like a Hamnet that we covered, or something like that. That's really got like I don't know, a level of filmmaking prowess, a level of like performance prowess, like just all of the pieces come together to make this really beautiful film that I don't know, to me, like makes me think about life and death and mortality and grief, especially, which is, there is this like kind of thing that I've talked about before, I think, on the podcast, where all of this will end in tragedy. I think everybody knows that like our lives, ultimately, everyone we know and ourselves, we will die. That's like the ultimate sort of destination for all of us. And that, I think this film is approaching that and talking about that. That existential dread is there. There's also something to be said for like the brevity of life, and the way that like nature and life, and the I love, there's a line in this film where it's like in nature, in the forest, the dead trees are just as important as the ones that are alive. and how that reflects so much with like, even if people are gone or what we go through, like how all of that is still, worth living and going through. And we talked a lot about that last week as well in the book. So yeah, what were your thoughts on the film? I'm super curious to start diving into this.
Yeah, I have a lot of them, and they're kind of difficult to pin down. I just want to start off by saying that I did really enjoy the film. I found it very emotional, beautiful, like you said. The cinematography, the attention to the natural world, and the way that sort of like invades every frame of this movie, I thought was great. It really kind of makes nature and the forest but really just nature in a larger sense, like kind of its own character in the film, that even though it doesn't get any lines, it's still quite present. And I found that a lot of the things in the novel you could kind of hold on to for like bits of meaning that Grainier was finding were transported to the film and were given to us, and almost distilled in a way that I think made them a little less ambiguous and a little more direct. Like, this is the meaning he's finding, right? And then that I don't want to get into it until we get into spoilers, but that all comes around, I guess, and the movie left me feeling a little bit differently than the book left me feeling.
Right.
And I want to like kind of zero in on those differences, and I don't necessarily know that I think one is better or worse. I just noticed that it was a little different. Like, it's subtly different. And we can explore those ways. And I think this felt to me like a fan of the novel, someone who read the novel and was moved by it deeply and found a connection to nature and maybe existence, perhaps in an even like wider sense. And I'm assuming this is Bently, or the screenwriter. I don't know if he wrote the screenplay for this or not.
He was co-writer. Yeah,
Co-writer.
I'll talk
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, maybe the two of them together. They found meaning in this book. They found connection, or they found something that resonated with them, and so they made a film about what they found in the book. And we see this happen sometimes, right, in adaptation, because everybody has such a like unique individual experience with the material, especially what I think is a true like work of art, and this book is. And I think it's valid to take your experience and say, I'm going to infuse my adaptation with this meaning I found and make sure that that's the message behind the film that I'm making. And I think he does that here, where I think it could cause friction for people who love the book is they might have found different meaning, or they might not have gotten all the way to where this movie kind of gets you. They might have found it a little more unanswered or ambiguous.
Well, they wanted to live in that. Maybe they wanted to live in that ambiguity and like really like let that be sort of part of what the story was trying to do. And yeah, the film like makes decisions. Like they had a take on it, like you're saying.
That's my main takeaway from it, because otherwise it is fairly faithful with some subtle changes here or there, and we'll talk about them. But a lot of the changes that were made are in service of sort of pushing the film's message in a certain direction. And like the direction isn't like necessarily simple. I'm not trying to say that this movie is like just giving you a very simple answer. No, it isn't. But it does move in a direction that I don't know that the book fully does. You could read the book that way, but it does feel like a reading of the book. So yeah, that's kind of my main thing I want to like touch on as we go throughout this, is just how effective do we think it is to find what the movie finds here. Because I did enjoy it, and I found it emotionally resonant, and I found that I was moved by it. And in fact, in some ways, the movie connected with me emotionally even more strongly than the book. Part of that is all the tricks that movies can do, right? With all the things they could throw at you, with all the different sensory, things, and all the music and all this stuff, that can really make you feel things.
Well, and when you see the emotion on somebody's face too, it's like if you're an empathetic person, like you're kind of,
you're gonna feel
if
it,
you're along for the journey and you care for the character, then you it's just like seeing it is so visceral.
Yeah. So in some ways, it does that, but I think in order to get there, there is some simplifications that are made to Grainier, who to me in the book is perhaps a little more complex and a little less easily likable. Whereas I feel like
Sure.
this version of Grainier you just kind of love him. Like, he's just a good dude trying to do good in the world, and like is pretty unproblematic throughout his entire life. Whereas, yeah, we know in the book, Grainier does some stuff where we're like, oh, I don't know about that. That's a little weird. And I'm not saying he's bad in the book, but just like, I think he's a little more gray. And it seems like the things that he regrets in his life, like he probably should regret some of them. Like he did some things he should probably regret. So, I don't know. It simplifies, and in order to achieve a result.
Yeah, and it does it early on, and we're definitely gonna talk about that when we get to the plot. Like because I noted that as well. It's like it's a more recognizable protagonist for a film to have that sort of change right out of the gate, and then like I think rather than being haunted by one thing, he's sort of his inaction rather than his action is kind of what the film is highlighting.
Yeah.
And I think we should get into that in a minute.
I had the experience too, as soon as I finished the movie, of feeling like I kind of want to go back and reread the book. I probably won't, because we got to move on to whatever our next project is.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh man, I kind of want to reread the book, because I felt like I got something different out of the movie than I got out of the book. And then watching the movie makes me want to revisit the book and like see where those differences are, and like really look at what is in the book and not in the film. And like, I don't know, just maybe you want to have this dialogue back and forth feeling, or I feel like there's more to explore here. And so I'm wondering for you now, because you've seen the movie twice, had the experience of reading the book in between, but then returning to the film.
Yeah.
What did that do for your viewing this time? And did you feel like you were seeing it differently than that initial viewing?
Yeah, for sure. I think the initial viewing, I of course didn't know what to expect. I just was going into a movie fresh, and like I experienced it as if it was the only version of the story that existed. So in that way, like it hit me so heavily, and like I love a film that lingers and like gives you time and space to breathe, and especially in a film like this where like it's blending memory and dreams and like the just like thoughts the characters are having, and like the timeline is nonlinear, and like some of like all of those things are making for a really interestingly edited and like sort of like propelled story as it goes on. But in that way, like I feel like I emotionally tapped into it so much on my first viewing, and like really just like hook, line, and sinker. Then I got a different kind of take on it with the book version, where like we've already said, kind of more morally gray, or at least like especially early on. And then throughout, I kept thinking about like there's a take here in the film that is so nature centric. And I loved that about the movie when I saw it originally. Mm-hmm. And that exists in the original source material, and we talked about it last week. But here it's like it's like so much central to some of the intertwined nature of like how everything in nature is one, and how our lives are all one. And like, well, I think
the film makes it explicit with some characters essentially saying as much to Grainier. Yeah. He has several conversations with characters where they kind of basically give him some philosophy to hang on to.
We talked last week also about like this idea of I mentioned we just did our Hall of Fame episode 2 weeks ago now when you're hearing this, and in that we talked about No Country for Old Men, and last week we talked about how there's a little bit of an overlap with like the idea of a character feeling like the world has left them behind. And interestingly, on this viewing, another film that we covered on that Hall of Fame episode, I was sort of brought back to in this one that we talked about was Arrival, and the way that the film is like approaching memory and dreams, and sort of like the arc and the scope of an entire life is what Arrival is kind of approaching in different ways. But this is the scope of someone's life, and we're seeing sort of snapshots all throughout, and we're seeing a character like that in the beginning has no place in the world, near the middle has found the perfect place in the world, and then by the end has gone through so much, and yet rather than, as I said, like, ultimately everyone's life is going to somewhat end in tragedy. You can like kind of, you can find the goodness in that, but ultimately like everyone, yourself, like you just like, you can't, live forever, and these things don't last.
It's an essential part of the human experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So once you approach that at the end of the story, when we get there, this character, rather than being so grief-stricken, so paralyzed by life and death and all the things that we all experience, finds a way to almost be in awe and finally find a way into the world and seeing the world from the perspective. And I found that to be so profound on the first viewing. And that's just like not exactly what I got from the book. But then in this viewing of the film, I felt like I was able to merge the two in some ways. And this is my favorite viewing of it now, because I think I am bringing in a fair amount of what maybe was left off the page, so to say, in the film.
Yeah. That can happen a lot with adaptations, right? Like it almost kind of like fills in the spaces that sometimes films leave.
And I feel like I understand Grainier and like so many of the other characters. Like, for example, there's this Native American character who like has an expanded role here in the film.
He has a slightly different name in the book. He's like Kootenai Joe or something, and he's got a different name here, Ignatius Jack or something.
Yeah. And his role has changed and kind of added on to, but there's also like a really pivotal, I think what this story does well is it kind of doesn't turn a blind eye to some of the tragedy and the racism and all the stuff that's the dirty past that America has, because it's kind of looking at America in these rosy ways often. But I think the original story, and here to an extent, like kind of pull out some of the ugliness that's in that past, and that character doesn't go through what he does in the book. And I felt like, that's like stripping out a little bit about that. And then, just this idea of like, obviously like the building of the railroads and how many immigrants built the railroads and how many stories that they had that were left untold by history and how their lives were also important, I think is what this film and story in general is saying. And like just because it's you don't have some legacy that's remembered by everyone doesn't mean your life wasn't so like important and like emotional and all these things. And I think that on the third viewing I'm really connecting with that part of it, of how like every life is this beautiful if you're open to it. And like I think that's like the ultimate empathy of the story.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this film, I think, rightfully identifies sort of colonialist guilt as like a through line of the novel, where like kind of everybody, as far as you might be from Grainier, especially if you're, I guess, an American, we're benefiting from a past that is built on a lot of racism, a lot of colonialism, oppression, genocide. And we all live in a modern society that was built on that sort of bloody past. And so there's like an inherent guilt when you start to become aware of that you can feel. I think both of them highlight that well. I think, just to highlight to me, the difference I kept coming back to was that Grainier feels a little more like a witness and perhaps occasionally he's like in the room for these things. So he's present for them. And perhaps through inaction, a bit culpable. Whereas, in the book, I think there is a little bit more of a sense of culpability of participating in this actively. Yeah. And so in a sense, like his hands are a little dirtier. Yeah,
it's a little harder to just take this person as like this righteous person who we see in the film. And like you said, I don't know that I like it any less, but it does fundamentally like change it in a way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I don't know. I can't talk about it anymore without spoiling things. So I guess let's talk about behind the scenes stuff, and then we can move into spoilers.
Yeah, I do recommend the film. I think it's so worth your time.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I just feel like this is again one, and I've said this a few times, and I know it can be kind of a cop out, but like, hey, we're an adaptation podcast. I think this is a good one to pair. Like, I think it's a short book. Like this book you could probably read in about 2 hours. I don't know, maybe 3. Like you could read it in about the time it takes to watch the movie. So like, I think this is a really good one to do both for. And honestly, I kind of feel like you could get something profound either way, whether that's viewing first and then reading, or reading first and then viewing. I think you could get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I said last week I'm going to be rereading this story. I already like Denis Johnson. And reading this, I was like, man, this is just like looking both nostalgically at the past, but also seeing like how progress is. It's like handling all of these things and saying nothing. It's almost like you said, like a witness to all of these things, and not coming down super hard on any direction, and just kind of saying like, this is how things were. this is, these were the good things back then, these are the good things now, and like kind of seeing our history in that way. And again, specifically like in the West, like in an area that was like less tamed, it was very dangerous, and like seeing that and like kind of the natural beauty of that, and then how humans are just kind of like pushing the buttons and making decisions that are just like changing the landscape of the world, and like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's so like interesting to think about.
There's a really good conversation that occurs in the film that I think is based on a conversation in the book, but if my memory serves, it plays out a little differently. I don't have like a great mind for specific details like this sometimes. I wish I could just be like, and this is the exact way it was different. I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember that maybe was in the book, but it was different. I don't know. Anyway, but in the film, which is the most recent one, they're having this conversation about cutting down trees and how old they are, right? Armin Peoples is like some of these trees are 500 years old or older, and there's this like younger guy who's like, it's not it's not a big deal, whatever. Like we could cut these trees down for 1,000 years, and by the time we're done, the ones that are new will be 1,000 years old again. Like kind of like it doesn't really matter. That's just kind of part of it. And I love that Armin Peoples comes back with like I used to think that way too when I was a young man. I don't know. It just like that really hit too, because it's like he doesn't explain exactly why he's changed his opinion on it, but just that he has. And the implication is like there's some sort of wisdom he's found, or the observing of this forest and doing this job for so long that has changed his mind from that perspective.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned last week, it's not really a story about like man versus nature, but at the same time, like Arn Peoples has been through so much that he's seen sort of like the forest as a character. Like you're saying, even the film is depicting it that way, and at one point even gets into the idea of like, a tree is a friend until you start like cutting into it, and then it's like a battle or a war or something.
First bite of the saw, and now you're at war with it. Yeah,
it's dangerous. It's a way of life that he's seen enough to see that like people die doing it, and also like he almost gets a little spiritual with it. I think our main character Grainier gets a little bit of this as well from Peoples. I think he sees like, is what they're doing wrong, and is there something coming in as a response to that? And like I think you see that in a few of the actions throughout the story, and him kind of grappling with that.
Yeah.
So let's start by talking about the filmmaker, and then we'll get into more of like the production of the film and how all this came about. So the filmmaker is Clint Bently. He's an American film director and screenwriter. His directorial credits include Jockey and Train Dreams, so second directed film. For his work as a screenwriter, he has twice been nominated for the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for Sing Sing in 2023 and Train Dreams. So he wrote the screenplay for Sing Sing, which is another excellent film. So he's got all the stuff that he's worked on have been excellent. He was born on a cattle ranch in Florida, and he attended Stetson University.
Fellow Floridian.
Floridian, born in Florida, yeah. Attended Stetson University and graduated in 2008. So as a screenwriter in 2016, he made his screenwriting debut with Transpecos, a film that follows U.S. Border Patrol agents who uncover a Mexican drug cartel plot. That script was co-written with Greg Quidar, who would ultimately become his lifelong filmmaking partner. So he also co-wrote this film, Train Dreams.
Okay, cool.
With our director here. And then in 2021, he made his feature directorial debut with Jockey, inspired by his late father, who was a jockey and horse trainer. The film won the Special Jury Prize for Best Actor for Clifton Collins Jr. At Sundance in 2021. And that leads us here to Train Dreams, which was picked up for nominations for Best Feature and Best Adapted Screenplay. I heard some things about Bently, and one of those was as he was developing this film and creating it, he lost both of his parents and became a father and had a child.
Wow.
So like the idea of this story and grappling with all the themes and everything in that, and him dealing with the loss of both of his parents and then becoming a father, the importance of that in this story as well. And
what a dramatic change, to be going through.
As you're creating this piece of art.
Yeah, it's about the impermanence of life in some way and trying to find meaning through that impermanence. Like kind of the eternal struggle of trying to find meaning.
If you had seen the film projected in 35 mil, there was like a a card that was handed out at some theaters where he had written something about the film, and I'm going to read that now. Just because I think it's really cool, his thoughts on the film and where he was coming from. So, Train Dreams tells the story of Robert Grainier, a logger and itinerant laborer who lives through the first part of the 20th century in the Pacific Northwest. He leads a simple life. He has a family, finds work where he can, and when his life ends, he leaves behind no real record he was even here. If he made any impact on the course of history, it was small, just a pebble thrown in a river, and yet he led a profound and beautiful life. With this film, I wanted to celebrate the magic and the beauty of the everyday. So often, we're either worrying about or chasing some future that may or may not come. We often forget that while we're doing that, our life is happening all around us. All of these little moments that seem so simple, a quiet morning with our family, dinner with a friend, these moments come to define our lives and give meaning to our time here. There seemed to be a deep well of cinematic potential in the book, but at the core of it, I was struck by the story of Robert Grainier. I wanted to make a movie to celebrate people like my parents, my grandparents, average, everyday people who the world doesn't often tell stories about or even remember. And yet, they're the people who make the world go round. No life is small. Each one has beauty and resonance flowing through it every day. In the course of his life, Grainier watches the world transform completely before his eyes. Early in his life, he's cutting down trees with axes and handsaws. Later, he's watching someone in space on the TV. We're living through strange and disorienting times. Life seems to be going faster than we can keep up with, and yet the story of Robert Grainier grounds me. I hope it does the same for you.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think that does provide some insight, I think, to me, in like the direction the film ultimately takes. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I find so much of this film to be profound, and this is the kind of thing that like it's stuck with me since I saw it like 6-7 months ago, and I have heard other people make comparisons to like the style of filmmaking, and I think he's even addressed it as much, but the work of Terrence Malick, who is a filmmaker that I also like quite a lot. Bently has said that like he's one of he's one of the greatest filmmakers.
You think I've seen any of Terrence Malick's films?
Yeah,
name's
like
familiar,
the Thin Red Line.
I saw that.
The Tree of Life.
I think I have seen the Thin Red Line, but I feel like I was like 14 when I saw it, so I don't think I got the full appreciation of it. Probably incredible
film. Like I highly recommend it. But he's a filmmaker that really operates in this space that I find to be really poignant and like really thought-provoking, and it's really cool to see a filmmaker like Bently coming along and kind of following in that path, and yet like he has his own voice here. It's clear that it's not a Terrence Malick film, and yeah, I just like I don't know, I think back to our coverage of Hamnet like earlier this year, and how we talked about like just the look of the film, the overall like attention to detail in the film, the way that it's like evoking emotion in such a dramatic way, and it's just like heightened storytelling that doesn't feel like it's leaning into like melodrama or anything like that. It really feels like genuine and like authentic, and that's just like I don't know, I find that to be so moving.
Yeah.
And I saw Bently cited Andrei Rublev by Andrei Tarkovsky, Princess Mononoke by Miyazaki, It's Such a Beautiful Day, Days of Heaven. Those were films that he specifically cited were like influences when creating this film Train Dreams here. And he also points out Jules et Jim and Y tu Mama Tambien, for the use of specifically third-person narration, which is a fun thing to dig into. I'm excited to talk to you about the narration because after our episode last week, you and I were talking about the audiobook a little bit of Train Dreams.
Old Will Patton, yeah.
Will Patton is the narrator of the book, and then Will Patton also comes in and he kind of bookends the beginning and the end of the film.
He speaks throughout a little bit here and there, actually.
He does, yeah, you're right. It's kind of he kind of pops in every now and again.
Yeah, he's the voice of the narrator, yeah.
It's so interesting too because like it's such an uncommon thing, I feel like, to have somebody who we don't see in the film. We don't know who this person is.
Yeah, the character's never revealed. Yeah, but we talked about that in the book too. It's kind of this like semi-omniscient narration, and I think that's kind of what Will Patton is representing in the film. He is this semi-omniscient narrator.
Yeah, it's like powerful, and he's got a great voice for it too. Like he's got the perfect voice for the story. He really brings you in like right away to the story, and the way that they're showing all these shots that you're not sure what the film is even about. You're just seeing these like beautiful kind of like, I don't know, poignant shots of like a tree that's been cut down, or you know, the shoes nailed into the tree.
Yeah, I love the shoes nailed into the tree, and then how the tree grows around them. Such a cool image of just the passage of time and meaning being lost, and like all of that is really powerful.
That being a moment within the story when we get there where it's like these men won't be forgotten because of this thing, and it's like, otherwise we are like, all of us are kind of forgotten. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
but
think
even
it's very rare.
they are kind of forgotten though. It felt
Right.
like later because he sees it again, like when he's like gone back for the last time to do logging, and it felt they didn't show that tree getting cut down, but I kept thinking like they're gonna cut this tree down.
It seems like it.
Like I don't think anybody there knows or cares about.
Doesn't
this.
have any importance. Like, and it's, I think that's something that's like an existential thing that both stories are doing, the book and the film, where it's like, do our lives have meaning, and like, does it matter? And I think all of us are constantly grappling with that, or maybe some people get to enlightenment and they figure it out, but I'm grappling with that, I think. Sure. Often.
Yeah. I think everybody does. To some
Yeah.
extent, if you're honest with yourself.
That idea of impermanence, but also importance, is like, it's like, it seems like it juxtaposes one
Well, and I
another.
love that finding meaning in the everyday, and like the life happening while you're worried about dreaming about the future, and like I resonate with that really strongly. I bet a lot of people do, and like I agree. I think that's one of the things like beautiful, slower films can really kind of highlight for me, is often it gives me that sense of being present and appreciating the sort of beauty in this sort of, often mundane moment, or just simple moment, and like finding more meaning there, because like the longer you're supposed to like look at something, the more you start to do it. And this is probably crazy to people, but in fact I could have done with a little more slowness to this already slow movie.
Sure.
I felt like there were some
it.
times where I could have actually lingered a little longer. Like push me a little bit, make me a little more uncomfortable with how long some of this is going on.
I'm all for that, and that's very Tarkovsky. Like,
I was like, because you mentioned Tarkovsky as like one of his influences, and I'm like, yeah, but Tarkovsky would have held on that scene for another minute than you did, or something. Like draw it out. I'm not advocating for everybody to do this, but if he's making a film about finding meaning in these small moments, like, maybe could have even leaned into that a little more. Probably hard with a second film to do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, but there's enough there to where like you can feel the body of what he was like. I agree.
Yeah, it's not really a criticism, just a thought. Yeah.
I wanted to note too, because we've had this conversation previously. Although Bently, the director and cinematographer, Adolfo Veloso, they considered shooting on film. But because they shot within a 29-day schedule, which is insane. I was thinking, I'm like, that's crazy. Like less than a month. It made it impractical to shoot on film, so they shot all of this digitally. So just tracking in terms of beauty and what you can bring to an audience, I think this is one of the most beautiful films I've seen in the last like 5 years. Like, it's definitely in a pantheon of that. Yeah. And shot digitally. It was shot on Arri Alexa 35. Notably, it was also shot using a ton of natural light and augmenting that natural light. And natural light is just, I mean, it's incredible. It's an incredible like source of light. Sometimes there's like overcast and you're getting all that soft spread. And then there are other times where, they're getting the harsh lighting of like a candle or something, even though it is quite dim.
I always wonder why filmmakers don't do this more. Is it something to do with the technology of the cameras has improved enough to where we're now able to do this more? Or is it like the lack of control you have over the light of a scene?
Yeah.
Why is there seem to be a resistance to using the natural lighting? Is that because things seem dark, like are darker than we realize?
Well, there's a bunch of different, like you're on the right path, but for one, consistency of light, right? Like the light, if the weather is going to change, the clouds are going to come across. So one scene, if you're cutting in and out of it, may look completely different from shot to shot.
Especially because you might have to take multiple takes. So
exactly.
Yes, it might naturally change, but like if you're coming back in the afternoon to shoot more of that scene, it's going to look completely different. Yeah.
And yeah, just like location scouting and weather scouting, like those are such important things to filming outside. They are augmenting it. Like there's no question that they're like diffusing light at certain times, or they're like reflecting, they're creating bounce in some ways. But ultimately, like using natural light in this way, part of the reason I would say is like it is historically difficult to do, especially with like as sensors get better in digital, you can do it with less noise. Like you can retain more information in the highlights and the shadows. But film, I mean, one day we're going to do Barry Lyndon, I'm sure. And when we do, Kubrick shot almost entirely with natural light in that film. And that was, 70s. And it's incredible. I mean, he's like, that's a story for another day, but like he filmed under candlelight in that film. And some of those techniques have carried through all the way to this.
Wow.
But, yeah, film has a certain threshold for light as well, and like it's just really difficult to do, especially in the early days of film. Like you had to have so much light to expose the film correctly. So as time went on, that technology advanced as well. But it's just like, I think it's a taste thing as well. Like they get used to that level of control to be like, I want this, because lighting is like anything else in film. It's all, some sort of subliminal creation that you're able to evoke an emotion with. So it's like, I need a hair light here. I need this fill, or I need some negative fill, so there's more shadow, and like just being able to do that and build out your scenes that way, that level of control. And then like going into it, I think a lot of filmmakers are scared of, not scared, I would never say scared, but like natural light is like, it's unpredictable. And it's like, you could end up in a scenario where you have a bunch of dailies and you're like, these look like somebody fucking shot it with, it looks like some amateur shot these, because it's like, it is a difficult thing to shoot with natural light in this way. You would think it's like, oh, just walk out there and start rolling and the light's going to look good because the sun's there. And no, it's not, that's not how it is. It's like very precise sort of things happening here.
Okay, cool.
I wanted to note, because you said this, Veloso, the cinematographer, said, quote, of nature, he said, it's also a character, and it's so influential. The shots are saying this is a main character. This also has an important voice, and we should listen to it.
Totally picked up on that. I thought it was interesting too that to me, and I don't know the exact term you would use, but the aspect ratio, I guess, of the film. And I wasn't tracking it to know if it changed throughout, but like to me, it felt a little bit more, what do they call it, letterbox, or like a little more boxy and a little less like widescreen.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't even like think to look at what the actual ratio was, but yeah, it wasn't like,
at least largely seems to be that like more almost letterbox shape. And
it wasn't Academy ratio, which is like what you're typically, like a standard Hollywood film would have, like the standard widescreen ratio.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting, and the effect it had on me, at least, was like when I see a widescreen of nature in particular, I feel like there's like a sense of like taking in the awe of it and like filling up the frame with it and like look at this massive expanse. But keeping it sort of tighter in, it just felt a little more focused on Grainier, specifically like his experience of it. And I got the sense that was happening all around him, and there was many beautiful shots. But something about the way that it was focused, I don't know, it just gave me more of like a perspective. And maybe I'm getting a little bit too
I like it. Yeah.
Analytical over it when it doesn't.
Well, they want you to feel
deep.
something.
I don't know, but
yeah, they want you to feel something about it, and I think that they'd be happy that you were feeling.
So at some point along the way, someone made a decision. I assume the cinematographer to shoot it in this way, yeah.
Sure, yeah. And oftentimes I feel like, just knowing the history of film, I'm often thinking like they're trying to get closer to like an old-timey feel of
that
a
was
ratio.
The other thing,
because the ratio was a bit
it felt
tighter.
almost like an older film, yeah.
Like it's not probably of the era, because like, film was just coming up around this era. So it maybe wasn't exactly that, but it was like more akin to something like that. And you mentioned like this idea of nature and trees. I thought it was interesting to have more of that like vertical frame when we keep looking up at these trees and like up into
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe that's a reason to do it, because there's so much verticality, you're right.
It really like emphasizes a lot of that throughout the film for me, yeah. And I do want to note with the trees, because quite a few are cut down, and there's like important things being said in the film about like cutting down trees and the significance of that and stuff.
They come to represent the sort of modernity, the future. It's like that we talked about, that young guy who's like, oh, they'll all grow back. It's like the sense of like leaving the past behind and not being able to ever get it back. And the sort of maybe perhaps naive view of like, oh, it'll all come back around anyway. And that, yeah, like just I like the idea of the trees representing that sort of metaphorically, is like they are the thing that gets cut down in service of modernity, as service of connecting, the country.
It makes me think too, like obviously like Tolkien was doing this to like evoke the Industrial Revolution as well, but like the orcs are cutting down the Fangorn forest. Mm-hmm. It's like industrialization, like that's just like an easy shorthand for that. But the reason I bring it up is Bently said that only a limited number of real trees were felled during the production, so they were trying to be really like, there's like obviously that shot in the very beginning where it falls down with the camera attached to it, but many of them were performed using an artificial prop constructed from wood fiberglass with visual effects added to extend the trunk and the canopy to resemble full-size trees. So they weren't actually cutting down millions of trees for the film.
That's cool. Glad to hear that. I'm a little surprised just because, I mean, I guess you want to have the control of a set that is and doesn't have like sort of signs of modernity. Because I was just thinking about how like logging is still a huge thing in the Pacific Northwest. Like this is very present. Oregon supplies tons of lumber to all over the world. So yeah, I mean, like logging is a huge industry to this day out here. But yeah, I would assume if you go to like a modern logging site, it's probably quite different than it would have looked. So you would have had historical problems regardless.
I'm always surprised when I go traveling places by what, like I'd been to Portland before, obviously, but recently I went on an extended road trip through the Pacific Northwest, and like so much of like a lot of those industrial towns that you would come through that weren't like these massive cities were huge logging towns, and you're often driving behind these huge logging trucks and everything like that. So like you say, it's like it's still happening. Like it's still just like a massive industry out there, and it's crazy to think that like this, this film is depicting the history of that leading up to where it is today. And we have these gigantic. I guess I won't spoil that film, but there's a film that came out this past year that looks at the logging industry and looks at some of that stuff, and then there's like automated machines are like cutting down trees and stripping them of their bark, and like there's not even a human element anymore, and that's like kind of getting into some of the AI talk.
Do I know about this film? I don't know if I've seen it.
I don't think you've seen it. I don't think I don't want to spoil it, but because it's like the very end of the film.
Okay.
But that's happening, and like people are losing their jobs to machines of cutting lumber, and like this is like, again, you take that from futuristic thoughts to modernity and then back to the
perpetuating
past.
itself in that circumstance, right? Yeah.
And just completely just like how much more efficiently you can do it snowballs as time goes. Like we can do it so much more efficiently than they could back then. It was axes to chainsaws to on and on.
Yeah, I mean, like I get a little bit of a chill when that guy picks up the chainsaw too. Like it feels so. They really make it feel like it's this monster, this like this, what is this thing? It's so unnatural to Grainier when he hears it. I think he can't even get it to start.
Yeah, totally. And yet like he was his job was to cut down trees. He's been doing it with saws and axes this whole time, like, so it's no less
it's just faster, I guess, maybe a little more crass.
So I did want to note too, a lot of the filming took place in Washington, filming locations including Toccoa, Snoqualmie, Spokane, Medellin Falls, and Colville.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't recognize all of those places, but a few of them I do. So it's cool to hear that they actually shot it where they should, like since it's such an essential part of this.
Totally. And it was like, I saw that they received like the Washington film incentives. And so like they like, they did it right. They filmed in Washington. They provided, jobs and in like a influx of, industry to the area. So it's always cool to hear, like you said, instead of just like going to Vancouver or going wherever, the big hubs and everything. So very cool. Anyway, let's if you're ready, I think we can jump into plot, and then we'll talk about like performances and everything else like that in there. So
I'm ready.
The film recounts the 80 years of life of Robert Grainier around Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Arriving in the area on the Great Northern Railway as an orphan child, Robert drops out of school and spends his younger years without much direction or purpose until he meets Gladys Olding. They marry, build a log cabin around Moy River, and have a daughter, Kate. Robert takes to railroad construction for the Spokane International Railway. There he witnesses a Chinese worker thrown from a bridge by a group of white workers for unclear reasons, which gives him continually haunting visions of the man and dreams of him being struck by a train. Robert later takes up seasonal logging work, but it takes him away from Gladys and Kate for long periods of time. Robert meets many men who leave impressions on him, but he also witnesses more tragedies along the way. One worker is killed by a vigilante avenging the murder of his brother. Several other workers are killed by a falling tree, their graves marked by pairs of boots nailed to trees. Robert grows closer to a fellow logger, Arn Peoples, who is severely injured by a falling branch and then dies a few days later.
Yeah, let's back up and talk about the opening kind of stuff that happens in this movie. I can now talk about the sort of the overall structure a little more too. There's a little bit of moving around in time. Like we get a shot of an older Grainier sitting on the train. Yeah. We get some mention of him looking back from later later in life. So we definitely get a sense of like this guy survives. We know he's older, but then like the movie settles into following his life pretty chronologically. And that is, I think, a difference between this and the book, where even within the same chapter, sometimes we're jumping across decades. We're jumping into different stories. And it does the thing, this happened in Hamnet as well, where we're going to like take different moments and we're going to link them by some sort of thematic, I don't know, distinction or perhaps conversation that they're having with each other. We're going to take these two scenes and we're going to put them together in the narrative, even though they occur different points in time chronologically. There's more of that happening in the book than we get here. And that doesn't shock me. That often tends to work better in a book, whereas I think in a film, you kind of give a nice through line of a story to follow and sink your teeth into. But yeah, one of the side effects of that is that you lose a little bit of that sense of, I've given you one little story, but now let me show you another story that feels very different, or like kind of undercuts the point that it felt like I was making maybe, and perhaps in this other little story. And it creates this sort of unease and like, yeah, just like it feels very difficult to pin down like what meaning can be found as we bounce between these different anecdotes about this guy's life. And, you know, you're just able to track this through line a little more, and it becomes instead like this fairly heartwarming setup of him meeting Gladys. She's so smart, you know, loves him. It seems like a great mom, and sort of comes to represent the life that he wishes he could live, but his job keeps pulling him away from. The need to, you know, perhaps capitalism, the secret villain of the story, needing to make money to like, you know, to have this life and to preserve it. And so he keeps getting pulled away, and he's like not watching his daughter grow. He's pulled away from the home that he wants to live in. I don't know. That's just a little simpler, because like we all recognize that story. Like we're familiar with that story, right? Like of like, this is the place I want to be. In some ways, she becomes like the figure that represents that. And I'm not saying that the book doesn't also do this, but I don't know. Like it complicates it a little more in the sense that because we keep jumping back and forth between her being alive and not alive. I think there was a little bit less of the sense that she was. I don't want to be too critical with how I'm saying this, but like she is a little bit identifiable to me as the love of the life type woman. She's like kind of perfect in a lot of ways. And yeah, I'm not saying there's not any of this in the book, but like, there's a little bit of familiarity with the way that the character is presented here, especially as a character who often does die to sort of provide a, you know, thing for the main character, the man, to react to. And she does end up sort of operating in that way here. I think there are some things in the movie to, you know, help reduce it from being as perhaps simplistic as all that. But I think if you were to level that criticism at the story in general, I think you could apply it to the film more easily than you could the book.
Yeah, and like because she is pretty prevalent throughout the book, rather than it being, and it is still the same kind of thing. Like she still does die in order to provide the main character with some sort of epiphany, or some sort of, not even epiphany, but like some sort of
just set him on his journey.
Yeah. But I can totally see the reasoning to be like, in a film where we're already going to play with a nonlinear nature, or maybe a little nonlinear, but more so like throwing viewers for a loop when they're like, is this a dream? Is this really happening? Is this a memory? Like all that kind of stuff's already going to be stacked into it, to then also like start doing a lot of nonlinear stuff. I feel like there's a worry that just visually you start losing people, like they lose where they are within the story. Now, I'm not saying that some people can't do it really well, but I understand the instinct to go away from that. And yeah, like it feels more literary, right? When you do that in a story, like it totally feels like the kind of thing that you do in a very like literary fiction sort of story, where it's this like interesting twist element, and it's kind of leaving you to interpret and think more and really dig into it. And I think like I love that kind of film. And, you know, I'm all for it being more and more of that in my films as much as possible. but I think that that's not necessarily as broadly appealing. So I think that they did do a little bit of like hedging their bets to make sure that it was like more approachable or more discernible. And I think that you can see that throughout, that they want people to be able to walk away knowing what the film is about a little more, versus like the ambiguity of the source material.
Again, I like this movie, and I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't have done it. It's just kind of like, this is the effect of doing it. If you're going to do it, this is some of the side effects you're sort of bringing into the story.
Yeah.
So the other part I want to talk about is the murder, seems to be a murder here, of the Chinese worker. This is different in the book. This is one of the key differences that we've already mentioned a little bit, but now that we're in spoilers, I think we can fully outline. So in the book, it's not as clear that he is like directly working with this guy, so he doesn't seem to know him nearly as much. Whereas this version of the other guy, it seems like he kind of knows him. At least they're like working together and talking a little bit.
Side by side, or at least like communicating. Yeah. I don't even know if they spoke.
I don't know either, but yeah, there's like a human connection there before everything goes down. In the book, he is actually a part of this group that is carrying this guy up. And he doesn't know, he's kind of been like swept up in it, but he's like actively kind of a part of it.
He seemed like he was like, not even begrudgingly, but he was like, his heart wasn't in it. Like he was just kind of going along with it.
Kind of just going along. He's like, I guess there must be a reason to do this. I don't know.
I think he carried his legs and helped carry him over. But notably in the book, they toss him and he doesn't die, or that he gets away, basically.
He gets away. So he escapes, and it seems he worries that he's been cursed for what he nearly did. And to me, this is just a little more complicated than what we get in the movie, where he tries to like ask them what he's done. They refuse to answer. He goes at one point to like maybe grab him and pull him away, and he gets kicked on accident. So that's like the maybe you could say like he's helping, but I think really felt like he was trying to interrupt it. And then they just carry him over and they throw him off, and he dies. So there's a permanent, stark repercussion to his inaction, I guess. But he's like unclear if he could have done anything to stop it anyway. He witnesses it and he feels guilt about it. And he's sort of haunted by this ghost version of the character. Probably is just someone in his mind. I don't know, but that's very different than this idea of like there is a living guy out there who has a grudge against me and is perhaps actively cursing me for a couple different ways. So in one way, it shows Grainier having a little bit of like almost like a mysticism, racism to him of like
it's a problematic
of like,
sure,
this Chinese guy is able to cast curses on me. So he's like thinking that that's possible again, because that version of Grainier like has some of that backwardsness to him that would kind of make sense for a character from that era. It would have been
of the era. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's like he could go try and find this guy. He could have gone and apologized. He could have done something because this was a human being he could have sought out. But he didn't do any of that. Instead, he just felt guilt and started to worry and like kind of look over his shoulder and feel like he was being cursed by this guy. So it's just like a little more complicated, and like he's a little more like culpable in his own guilt here. Like he's not taking actions to try and do anything better. Whereas like the guy dies in the film, there's nothing he can do after that occurs. And so now he's just forced to live with this guilt. And like, it feels like this isn't that big a difference, but I think it kind of is, because it just changes the nature of that moment, which is, I think, clear in both, like the kind of the moment he regrets most in his life. And he starts to think that the bad things that happened to him, I think it's very clear in the movie, and that he has like a conversation with the guys who's looking at him. Like he feels like the bad things that happened to him are because of this, and are sort of punishment to him over the things that he didn't do, I guess, in stopping it.
Well, and interestingly, because it like they kind of end up in similar scenarios, or they send the character in a similar path, but like you said, there's one version where he kind of, like you said, is showing almost like cowardice towards the situation and like won't face it, and instead that
refusing
makes him
to sort of admit his own culpability in it, and not culpability through inaction, culpability in that he was helping, versus culpability of like, oh, I wish I could have done something to stop it, but like we all kind of saw it happen and it didn't really look like he could have stopped it. Like that's just different. That's just different.
But the second version, the movie version, I found it interesting, especially on a second watch, where he sort of grabs onto the legs, seemingly like he's going to help. Like, I don't think he's trying to help them carry him away. I think he's trying to pull him back.
Yeah, I thought he was trying to like slow him down, like, hey, tell me what's happening here.
Yeah, exactly. But then he gets kicked, and when he gets kicked, he like kind of like either like acts like it pushed him so far that he's like
He
it like stops him in his
gives
tracks.
up. Yeah, he gives up trying to stop what's happening.
And I'm like that was his moment of like he could have continued to try.
Absolutely.
And I think he would have felt better about himself or whatever, but he didn't. He like felt and I think that's him grappling with how he kind of how the world comes at him a lot of the time too, is like it's just he lets the world happen to him, and like he could have, you know, enacted some sort of change here possibly, and he regrets it. And like we've said, this also just straight up frames him as more of a forgivable character, like more of a character that has you know, a good heart, and it's just like could have happened to anybody kind of thing.
Yeah, because after this occurs, we're like, oh yeah, maybe he could have done something more in the moment, but this is now like a moment that has passed, and it's kind of like you got to move on with your life. But like, yeah, again, in the book, that character, the Chinese worker, lives, so it's like maybe he could continue. He's actively continuing to not do anything about it. And maybe he couldn't have found the guy or something, but it never says that he like seeks him out to try and do it, you know, apologize or anything. And in fact, a lot of the thoughts we get from him are kind of racist. Like he kind of like calls it a lot of it gibberish, and he's not very respectful of it being a different culture or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, you know, he was spouting nonsense kind of stuff, you know?
And I think that part of the commentary there too is like, this is, you know, based on my research, 90% of railway workers in the West were of Chinese descent. And they're like largely forgotten, not talked about, not given the credit for all of that work. That really, like we've said even last week, like the railway in the US, like creating that connective tissue all throughout the country, and the way that creates efficiency, and like it put America at the forefront of the world in a lot of ways and stuff. And like that was on the backs of like immigrant labor and stuff. And it's crazy to see, like, again, this character won't face the darkness or the things that have been done and all that other stuff because it's like, oh, he's ashamed of it or something. And I think that like that's a lot what I draw from, honestly, both versions, but more so the book version.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know any of this, so this is fully just a take. It's coming from me. But to me, it feels like Denis Johnson identified really strongly with Grainier himself. And one thing I know about Denis Johnson is that he had a lot of regrets about his life, about his time with drug addiction.
We talked a little bit about it in Jesus' Son way back when, yeah.
Yeah, struggling to forgive himself over things that he had been a part of and that he had seen and done. And I think even as he was trying to find the ability to give himself some grace, perhaps, I think he was unwilling to shy away from culpability and feeling like, I want you to also look at this guy as if he kind of deserves it. I mean, in Jesus' Son, it's Fuckhead, our main character, and he does some shit. He's awful in some way. And I felt a little bit the same here in that he doesn't want to let Grainier fully off the hook. But it feels to me like Bently read the book and felt deeply sympathetic and empathetic towards Grainier's life and struggle. And so the version that he made in his adaptation represents that. It represents a character that you feel bad for, that you feel connected to and empathetic towards, sort of unambiguously. Whereas, my read of Denis Johnson is just that he doesn't want it to be clean. He wants us to feel a little bit of sympathy, but also a little bit of like, maybe there were some things you could have done differently there. Maybe you are kind of to blame for some of this. Yeah. So anyway, we can move on now, but just that's my read of it. And I just, because Denis Johnson to me always feels like he doesn't want to give you a character that you can like fully root for.
Which is interesting. Like that's what makes compelling storytelling in some cases. And I think there's room for, you know, both types of story, obviously.
Agreed.
So this took us up to the point where Robert has already met Gladys and Kate's been born and everything. And I just wanted to talk about like how this is all depicted. Like you said, maybe it's very picturesque and maybe it's a perspective thing based on like Grainier's memories of these things. Like maybe you can see it all in that. But, you know, I think they do a really good job of setting up that emotional uppercut that's coming.
Well, so Armed People's part happens before the fire, and it's this loss of someone he knows. It talks about how he's seen death before, but it rarely had been someone he knew that close, right? So it's almost like a foreshadowing what's about to occur, and the way he goes out commenting on how everything's so beautiful, but he's sort of been like lost. He can't remember his own name. He's lost all connection with himself.
he's in a twilight state, and he's like clearly like there's like between the veil, like he's almost gonna pass, but like it's very poignant to me to have that moment of like, isn't the world beautiful, like the perspective of that, of like this might be his last moment.
It's like he's lost his sense of self, but he still can see something true.
He's like, what's beautiful, Arn? And he's like, everything. And
yeah,
it's just like, it's such a thing that I think Grainier holds on to. Yeah. And this is a good time, I think, to talk about some of the performances. Like, I thought William H. Macy, Arn Peoples is like my favorite character in the movie.
I really liked him, and especially in the movie. Yeah, I think he's really good. He's good in the book too. Like, just this guy who, you know, he does it. I love it when he's like sitting around like telling people what to do, and he's like, "Oh, if you let me pick up that hatchet, we'd be done here in an hour." You know, he's like so funny. But he's just
when
like
he's
just
talking about
Arizona,
he's like, it was 116 degrees, and every degree was a foot long.
Yeah,
and all this stuff about like the sun and the shadows.
The only way you could get an escape was being in the shade, and there weren't no shade. You know, like,
yeah. And he's like, I don't even get my motor going until I hit 100 degrees and all that stuff. Like, it's incredible.
Oh, and I love, he has a line where he says, he asks him about, do you have family somewhere? And he's like, everywhere there's a smiling face, I have family, or something like that. I just love that line. It tells you so much about the character. And it's like, everywhere I go, I have family, because there's, you know, except for Kansas. He's like, he just randomly takes a shot at Kansas, which is funny. So I really like that character. I agree. He was great.
He's really good. And like, that's what makes the, you know, the flip side to when he gets one of these, and he brings up that idea of like trees or like these sentinels. They're like,
yeah. So it's like another guy is giving like a eulogy kind of for him, or talking about him after he's died. And he gives up, he says this thing he's heard about trees going to war with you, and but he's like, but, you know, he didn't have anything to do with that tree, so I don't know what to make of that, you know, and he just kind of leaves it hanging. And I love that moment, because that feels like more like the book, where it's just like, I don't know what to make of that. You know?
Yeah, like in a different film, they may be like, and I think that means this, and this, and they're feeding that to the audience. In having a character say, I don't know, it's like asking us to be like, what do we think? You know, and I think that's the point.
And they
of the
just have
story
some shots of some random people. Like, there's a guy who we don't know anything about, and we linger on his face as he looks like confused about what even happened.
And like we talked about it last week with the book, but like this story is about the fact that life is random and there's chaos, and like there's nothing there might not be meaning to a lot of this stuff. And
resists easy meaning. You know, nature's like that too. Like, nature, we talk about this like Annihilation, right? Like, nature resists our human understanding. It resists our human, morality. Like, anytime you're trying to put morality on nature, you're going to fail, because like it doesn't adhere to that. It has its own essence that we are both a part of because we arise from it, but also like, in so many ways we become so distant from in our modern lives.
And everybody thought Arn was going to go up in a cloud of smoke because he was doing all the explosives and everything, but he gets taken down by a random Widowmaker, and the fact that he survives for a period of time, like it makes it so heart-wrenching and everything, and to see, and again, the way that it's shot, like these two men with their backs against the tree, you can see Grainier cares about him, and these are like the snapshots all throughout the story of like, early on we get the story, this is straight out of the book, where he like comes across a man who's like dying, and he like brings a boot to give him water and everything like that. And
yeah, and that guy's terrible. Like, he reveals this terrible thing that he did, and that scene's not in this film. There's a couple scenes like that aren't truly in the. Yeah, you're right. We do kind of see it, but we don't hear the story. There's a couple things like that are omitted that kind of, again, are like things that almost introduce some friction in the narrative that we're going to leave out. We'll get there at the end, I guess, but I'll just bring it up now because we're talking about these kinds of scenes. In the book, there's like this moment where Grainier is like filled with lust, and he's like learning about women, and he's learning about their bodies, and he's like overcome with lust, and he's like having like violent thoughts, and he's like, you know, and it feels like he's on the verge of doing something awful, and then like he's able to come away from it and not pursue those urges. But it's just a weird moment in the book that like shows another side to Grainier that doesn't fit this like good dude who never has like, who just kind of like life keeps happening to him, but we love him. That we kind of get in the film. It's just like a couple of these moments aren't in the movie. It's
like even the best people that you know probably have dark thoughts, and I think that's true to life, and that's interesting, and again, like compelling storytelling because it is so authentic.
Well, and you could view it maybe that's nature, right? Like he's got urges because he's in a body that has hormones, and you know, as much as you like love somebody and then you lose them and you think, oh, I'll never love again, or I'll never be attracted to someone else again. Like sometimes the body has a different different thoughts, because it's like, nope, you're still going to get these chemicals and they're going to make you feel certain ways. Or you could look at it as like he's so mystified by women and his like clearly doesn't really understand how their bodies work at all, and like how that could manifest into some sort of like dark obsession or something that he like almost gives into but then backs away from. So like there's lots of different reads you could make of that, but I think that at the core of it, I just am noting that it's occurring in this character who, when viewed through that lens, feels a little more like human and rounded and imperfect than the version we get in the film.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to talk about with Arn, and then I think we should talk about a couple other performances. But he has this quote that I thought was just amazing. It was before he was hit. It was like right before he was hit by the Widowmaker. He says, "This world is intricately stitched together, boys. Every thread that we pull, we know not how it affects the design of things. We are but children on this earth, pulling bolts out of a Ferris wheel, thinking ourselves to be gods." And I think that that's obviously kind of a core to this version of the story of like, this is the stitching together. The world is stitched together in ways we can't perceive, and our lives are this way and nature is this way, and there's that connection between the two and that similarity. So I wanted to shout that out. I thought Arn Peoples is just is an awesome character.
He's great.
Let's talk about Joel Edgerton as Grainier. I thought he was fantastic. What were your thoughts on his performance?
Yeah, I like him as Grainier. He some of my, criticism, I guess if you want to call it that, or just observations about what's different, a lot of that is really about the writing of it and what is chosen to be included and what isn't. I don't want to lay any of this at the feet of the performance, because I thought the performance was excellent. I think he is understated. I think he's expressive. Doesn't say a lot throughout this movie, and yet we feel close to him, and we feel kind of like we're understanding where he's at mentally most of the time. The way they were able to age him up throughout the film, I thought was convincing and looked good. So I honestly was pretty pleased with.
I thought it showed a lot of range in his performance. Like the scenes with Felicity Jones, who's Gladys. I thought like their romance I bought so much, like their chemistry, their performances together, the love that he had for her. He was like so obsessed with her to an extent, and like I like the fact that he begins as this man that really has no like true purpose. It feels like he's just kind of wandering life, and then finds her, gives a meaning. And like how invested he is in that relationship. And then to juxtapose that with how far he goes into like that, I mean, just like really quiet old school style grief of like, and it even shows like more emotion than I even like, there's the moment when he like breaks down with the Ignatius Jack character, and he's like apologizing for his emotional outburst and stuff and everything like that. But it's like, that's like, he all of that was so convincing to me, and I really was taken with the performance. I thought he absolutely killed it. Yeah, and everybody, honestly, all throughout this film, like I wouldn't say anybody had a bad performance. I was really taken with all of it.
Yeah, I liked everything.
All right, so moving into the next part of the plot here. Although Robert tries to take up work closer to home, he faces struggles in the post-World War I economy. He and Gladys decide to farm and build a lumber mill so he can stop logging. However, when Robert returns from his final season of logging, he discovers the cabin destroyed in a wildfire, with Gladys and Kate missing. Despondent, his friend Ignatius Jack gives him company, then he rebuilds the cabin. As Robert returns to logging, he becomes out of place amid new technology and younger, rougher men, so he decides to stop.
What a harrowing sequence. I love the way it was shown with just seeing the smoke and like reacting to it. No one knows what it is and what it means. The way he that shot of him in the town and the sort of chaos all around him, and then he kind of looks out at the woods and he sees like the fire. It just looks like I don't know, hell on earth.
Well, the tension that they build up to, where like he's on the train, he wakes up, he hears her voice, and then like people are looking out the window of the train, like freaking out. Then he gets into the town, like it was well crafted scenes that built up all that tension. And I read that like obviously because you don't want a fire to happen in the Northwest, no fires were allowed on the set. So I think a lot of that was either on a stage or
that makes sense. It didn't look like. I didn't think it was real, but
yeah. I also read too, when I'm just in talking about that, I read the cinematographer for the candles. There's no open flames on set, so all the natural candlelit stuff, he built like a custom rig to like make all that look very believable, which I totally bought throughout the film.
Nice, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so he loses them, right, and it's a heartbreaking sequence. The way he, goes out into the woods looking for them. Kind of unclear how he doesn't die out there. Seems like definitely in danger himself of smoke inhalation death. And then I thought it was really effective the way he just seems to like squat in the former the wreckage of his own old home. He's just like living up there, just like sleeping on the ground. In
the weather, just dealing with it. And it's like that's like, obviously like an externalization of his self, at that point. Is like that's how low he is and everything. I thought that was really well done. And this is before that he actually is like going town to town looking for them, and then eventually goes like back and is like, they're gonna return to me.
He's like, I gotta be here if they come back. Yeah.
And Ignatius Jack had like given him a loaf of bread and stuff, so it was cool to see like that relationship.
And then I love that he comes back out there to check on them.
And I feel like who knows what would have happened had he not. Like I think that's what the film is implying too. Like that was he needed some connection, and between the dog, Red Dog, and Ignatius Jack and the pups and everything, like all of that, just like and I love the way that connects to obviously what Gladys says about like dog, we're gonna get a dog, and like these dogs, the pups can like they know as many words as a baby and all that stuff, that conversation they have.
Red Dog's right out of the book. I think it's a cool moment. I love the conversation they have about the pups and whether or not they could be wolf dogs. Wolves, was an interesting one. I do really like this connection he has. It feels, this is a little different than the book. I guess their relationship's just like a little more complex, or a little less I'm going to provide wisdom and be a little bit of a guide for you than the character ends up being in the movie, which we've talked about before. This is kind of a trope in movies, of especially having a non-white character provide this sort of role for a white character. So it's interesting how the film introduced some of these things that aren't really present in the book. It's like you get into the film and like get a little bit of this. And it's not to say I hate the character. Like I don't want you to think that I'm saying this is a bad character. It's just like it's when you tie this character into a larger history and a larger pattern that is seen. And it's just interesting that this gets introduced in the adaptation, but actually isn't really present in the book.
Not in this, like they're more like acquaintances that have some overlap and stuff.
And he gets some wisdom from him, but he's like, he's not like coming out there and like taking care of him and bringing him food in the same way. Yeah,
I think obviously like the idea is sound of like, okay, you want to represent the people that would have been there, and I think there's a commentary.
It's loaded having this character be native, like be a Native American too, right? And like the way that they're like,
it's on purpose. Yeah,
it's on purpose.
There's this idea of like this is a commentary, I think, on it's loaded because Americans stole the land of the Native Americans, and in this way, this man is like at his property, quote unquote, where he had all this stuff happen, and still you're having like this Native American character care for this person on like a human level versus it being like, more than, more of like the historical context of everything. Yeah. Like you said, it leans into something problematic where it's like there were many times throughout history where Native Americans were welcoming and friendly to Americans and doing things, going out of their way, and then like often were taken advantage of. And like,
it also just reduces the humanity of that character. It turns them a little bit more of a symbol or a little bit more of a metaphor, or just in service of our main character. It's not to say that it doesn't work. And like, I like this character, but let's talk about what happens in the book. With that character in particular, that character gets taken out. We hear about by a bunch of white men who get him drunk for the first time.
They trick him into
drinking. Yeah. He's never drinking before. And when he gets drunk, he passes out on train tracks where he gets run over by like 5 trains and killed. And then his community comes out to like collect the pieces of his body.
Yeah, to give him like a proper burial.
So, whoa, that makes us feel really different now, because like there's something that has happened due to like the ignorance of white men, it seems like, that he's interacting with. And then also he's killed by the symbol of modernity, right? The thing that we're building these train tracks for runs the guy over and kills him. So like, I don't know, there's just like, his story even has like a terminus to it in that sense. Whereas what happens with Ignatius Jack? We don't know. It's not his story. Like he just goes off and ceases being in the story.
Much more palatable, I think, for general audiences, and like in that way, yeah, it does cut out, so because it's like that is the book version is an unflinching look at the historical context of like the kinds of things that went on that are, you know, lost to history or forgotten or not thought about as much, especially in, you know, the modern era versus back then.
Well, in the way that like modernity runs this guy over and no one seems to care, and yet it's his community that comes out there and picks up the little tiny pieces of him to give him a burial. Yeah.
All right, so this last bit of plot here. Taking a job as a carriage driver for townspeople, Robert meets Claire Thompson of the United States Forest Service, who is in town to conduct a survey, and encourages him. He continually walks through the woods, believing he can feel the spirits of his wife and daughter sometimes, and hopes not to drive them away. Claire, in turn, tells him how her husband died after a long illness. One night, Robert believes he sees an injured young woman whom he believes may be Kate, and he tends to her wounds, then remembers playing with baby Kate by the river. However, after a night of dreams, he awakens to find her gone and a window open. He determines to continue living in the cabin in case she ever returns. Years go by, and the world changes around an aging and weathered Robert, who rides the Great Northern into Spokane, witnessing John Glenn's flight into space on a television. The film ends on a spring day when Robert purchases a passenger flight in a biplane. As the plane loops and circles in the air, sights and sounds of people and places throughout his life pass through his mind. The narrator recounts that Robert died in his sleep in the cabin in November 1968, leaving no heirs, but that on that spring day in the plane, quote, as he misplaced all sense of up and down, he felt at last connected to it all.
Which really is, I think, the main message of the film. That it arrives at, but let's save that for the end. I want to talk a little bit about the differences, but let's back up a little bit. I forgot to mention a little bit or talk a little bit more about the red dog situation, in the sense that I've always felt like the dogs represented a little bit of like, they're kind of the bridge between the animal world and the human world. It's a domesticated animal. It's the earliest domesticated animal in dogs. There are wolves who become domesticated. The idea that some of the descendants of this red wolf or this red dog are wolf pups, right? Like, so they're kind of already bridging that gap. But then also how this is an animal who comes and spends time with him when he kind of needs it most, when he is devoid of any connection at all. I found that particularly moving as someone who has lost my dog fairly recently. Mm-hmm. One of my dogs. I found that part really affecting. I don't know how much of it's just because of what I'm dealing with right now, but I thought that was really sad. I mean, seeing the puppies, so adorable. Love that part, and I think metaphorically it is important to the story how the animals, and particularly dogs and wolves, play in. We hear howling. You know, he's having the girl howl at one point. We didn't have the moment in the book where it's like a pack of wolves is at his house, and then like that's when she gets left. We don't see the wolves. Instead, we just get the girl who he finds outside. It is kind of dreamlike. I think it's kind of unclear whether or not this really occurs in both the film and the book.
The only thing that you could point to is like the windows open. So it's like, do we believe that the window's open because she crawled out? I don't know.
Maybe could he have left the window open on his own? Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, there was a part in the book where they've been talking about this like she-wolf who lives in the woods, and so they kind of set it up in a certain way where she's like almost part wolf, part human. In the same way that like the domesticated dog is part domesticated dog, part wolf. There's just some similarities here, which I think is interesting. And then we get this occurrence that feels surreal. It's like, did this really happen? This doesn't seem like it could really happen. But how it is a moment where he is trying to atone for this guilt he has over not being there for her. And it's unclear whether or not he's able to really do it. And yeah, he's sort of haunted by it in the sense that he feels like he wants to be there in case she comes back. But in some ways, maybe it feels like it gives him a little bit of I don't know, resolution that he was seeking.
Right. Like whether that was even his daughter, which I don't think it was, but even if whether it even was a person or not, like I think if we were to take it as there actually was a person that he helped, and maybe he, you know, put her in place of his daughter in his mind, he helped that person and that person leaves. Like he felt that was in some way he's been able to atone for it. And I don't know. I feel like the film kind of leans more on it, like there actually was somebody there that he helped.
Yeah, but definitely not clear whether or not that is his daughter. In fact, it doesn't seem to be.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and we lose some of the surreality around her, like maybe being like a she-wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a part in the book where like he seems to see like wolf legs on her, and it's unclear if that's just because like her legs are broken or something. But
it's fun. It's good storytelling. I was all that stuff is like I keep saying, it's kind of that literary stuff that I like grasp onto. That's like surreal and like odd and unique and strange, and like I love the way that it plays out. We also have like him choosing to stay there at the house for the rest of his life, seemingly. And we get the scene of him like being sick, and the dog comes back around that time period.
I think that's the last time we see the dog in the movie. In the book, it said that the red dog at some point goes out in the woods to die on its own. Like doesn't like he doesn't know what happens to it really. Yeah, we don't get that in the movie, but that's okay. Ultimately, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
The thing that this leads me to is the tie between the old world and the new. The way he's sort of left behind by the passage of time, and we see these scenes where he's going into town, and he seems like this kind of relic. And how much I kind of love these scenes, and I love the like him seeing Glenn on the screen and going like, "Where's that guy at?" And she's like, "Oh, he's on the he's in outer space," and he's just like standing there. He doesn't say anything. He's just like looks up. He's like, "Huh," just like.
Well, I've
amazing.
Growing up, I always had these thoughts too of like the people who saw like the advent of the automobile into like there was such a small period from like the early 1900s to like the 60s or 70s where like you literally could have seen like electricity become a norm, automobiles, like all this stuff come about, and then a man on the moon like in 69. It's like that's crazy, and that's a crazy like span to be able to to have all of that in your mind, to have grown up in the way that they did, and then to take it all the way
at the end of the film, I love the note that he never spoken to a telephone. That's right out of the book. So like even though he's seen it all, he's not really taken part in it. He hasn't been to all these places. He's kind of lived in like this couple states basically. Right. Never really left.
Did you listen to the song at the end during the credits?
I don't know. I don't.
There's like there's a song that was created just for this film. It's an original song performed by Nick Cave. It's called Train Dreams, and in it, it's just like, and often I feel like if a song is made for a movie, it's hit or miss, and in this case, it's quite nice for the credits, and I thought it fit well. But it goes through and it's talking about kind of the events of the like I'm having train dreams and all these things. But early on, one of the first verses, it said something about like I met a man on a train or something, and his name was Elvis, and all the ladies went crazy for him. So like calling back to that element from the book for a song that was written about the movie, and it was pretty interesting. Cool. You should check out the song.
I'll have to check that out.
So there's another thing we haven't touched on very much, and that's this Claire Thompson character, who it seems like it's almost like an insert for like like maybe a relationship that he could have in more of a neater, tidier story, where it's like, oh, he ends up happy, and this is like
finds love
an
again.
Expected sort of thing. And they both have like gone through, and that conversation that they have looking out at the forest is so like about like, he opens up to her and talks about how like he's like, I feel like the sadness will swallow me some days, and then other days I feel like it happened to someone else. I'm like that I think everybody's had that feeling before when you're going through grief or whatever that is, something unbelievable that you just can't fathom is happening. You're kind of in shock about it.
That detail he gives about hearing his wife and daughter playing in the woods, but he's like afraid to turn and look because then they'll stop.
Yeah.
Like so sad. And the way they connect over that, I found really, really moving. I like the way this character operates in the story. I like the role that it fills. It does give you a sense of like a near connection that he could have had. Like he has it in a way, but it's like you kind of wish they could have gotten it together or something, because there seems to be something between the two of them. I don't know.
But life isn't always that.
But life's
neat.
not that neat. So like,
I like that it.
So that I'm glad they didn't go that far. Would have been too much. That being said, she is someone who is like literally her job is to look for forest fires, the thing that killed his family.
Yeah.
She gives him perspective. She provides him with sort of like permission to experience life in the way that he has, experience the grief in the way that he has. She says no one's crazy. It's not crazy to like whatever you do is just kind of a part of it. Like she really kind of provides him with what he needs emotionally, I think, at this point in his life. And so, I like the character. Is it neater than the book, though? I think absolutely it's neater. It's absolutely neater to have a character like this show up and provide you with all of this sort of like emotional reassurance you need, who represents someone who is so in touch with nature like him, right? And she's now up in this fire tower, which is like, they're stunning. They're so cool to see. Like, I love them. Real thing, And like the idea of this person, she seems so perfect for him, right? This is exactly the kind of person that he should be meeting.
Well, and she also had like lost her husband to a long illness that seems like it was grueling in its own right.
Oh, and she has that whole thing where she's talking about how ancient the world is and glaciers, and like the world has seen all of this before, and like some of that perspective can be really powerful too. And like none of this is new in a sense. And like I don't know. I think I love like it totally by how drawn to her he would be, and I like all of that. And again, like I think for the film that this is, it works. I just want to note that it is different, and it's a little neater than what we get in the book.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of neater, like we can get to the end here. So he does have the scene where he goes into town, and when he's in town, he sees the wolf boy at the show, and he's very emotional over it.
The wolf boy is where the book ends. To note that it ends on this, like, and I like that we got the moment here. I like that we see him like crying about it. Like he's obviously really emotionally affected by it.
Well, again, it calls back to like a lot of the connective tissue with his daughter, and then also like
the animals. Yeah,
there's something about like, yeah, we talked about it last week too, like this idea of like a feral sort of person, like that idea of like the old world and like the new world, and there's this modernity, and like the people who are at the show are laughing at him seemingly, but he is like so moved by it. And then in the book it lets out this,
well, there's almost like a supernatural roar that happens, yeah,
right,
which we don't hear in here, but that's okay because it would have been hard to like, it's like you kind of can't put that on screen. But instead we get the biplane. So this is a thing, he does ride the plane in the book, but it's not the final scene. And instead we're left with that line, which you read, and I think is a good line. I think it sums up to me the message of the movie, right? Like, yeah. Like literally it's like, here's the final message of the movie. I want to read for a moment, if you will, like the end of the book, so we can kind of look at how the difference is here. So in the book, he's just witnessed this performance of this boy who's let out this roar, and this roar happens, and everyone in the room is like sort of stunned into silence after what just happened. And he says, and then the book ends, and suddenly it all went black, and that time was gone forever. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's things go black, and the moment that is so profound and affects everyone in the room and affects him so dramatically is now gone. We leave it behind, right?
It's fleeting.
It's impermanent, and it's gone. And the film instead ends in him sort of soaring in the sky and finding connection. So to me, this is, again, I'm going to circle all the way back to what I said at the beginning. It feels like an experience someone had with this story. It feels like a takeaway someone left when they read this book. Like it was their connection. That's what they found in the story, and that's valid. It takes that personal connection someone had and makes it the text of the film. In a way that the book, I think, resists a little bit of that. Like you could still read some of this stuff into the book; it's there, but it is left still feeling impermanent, and like, yeah, maybe you're finding a connection, but like, is that connection real? Is that connection meaningful in any way? I think it's more ambiguous. Whereas in the film, yes. I absolutely feel like it means something. And I find that moving. I find that powerful. I resonate with that ending. And I found it emotionally affecting. I was thinking about it afterwards for a long time. I like it. It's just different. So like, this is just a situation where I think it's worth noting differences. And I don't want to always act like something that's harder to pin down and has less like easy meaning and is more ambiguous is always better. That's not always the case. That's not always, satisfying. Sometimes it's satisfying to tell a story that leads you to a certain point that the creator wants you to get to. And I think that's what the film does here. So, yeah, I mean, like, those are I think I've kind of arrived at a lot of my swirling thoughts around this, and like, I like both. Yeah, I don't know what. Maybe we should get ready to give our votes, because that's the last thing we got to do here is figure out which one we like better.
That was like the best setup you could have given yourself. So go ahead and just keep it going. And tell me
I'm going to make you go first. Yeah. I think okay. I want to sort of give myself a moment to really come down a certain way, and I want to hear what your thoughts are first.
Sure. When we read the book, I was really struck by how much. So we've already said it's a novella. It's a fairly short read, but within that read, the experience that I got was so dramatic and so interesting. And I wasn't expecting. I expected that the film was going to have taken it to a whole different level, and like Dennis Johnson, what he does with his work, and the way that he's such a specific voice, and I just had so much fun with it. And I said in that last episode, I was like, I will be reading this again. Like I can see myself returning to it many times. I probably one of my favorite things we've read on the podcast. But I can't discount like how moving the film was to me as well. Like it's like I think it's like a straight up draw almost if I'm to be, you know, a fence sitter. But here I am like needing to pick something, and like I like both. I found so much as like a filmmaker in the film that I like to see in films coming out
Agreed.
these days is like, even if it is more approachable than a literary piece of work that's a short novella from an author like Denis Johnson, it's definitely a far cry from some of the most watered down things that we're seeing out of Hollywood. It's like
don't take it the wrong way when I'm saying these things. It's not like
I appreciate it so much for what it is, and it's so beautiful to look at it. So it renders that era, that environment, that part of the country so well.
I love the way that nature was brought so to the fore and made a central character in the film.
And I just remember like the experience I had watching it with my wife too was profound. It was profound. I mean, both of us were crying, and like just like it was such an experience seeing that film, and like still stands as one of my favorite films from that year. And I just like it's got like so much haymaker energy. Like it's like meant to make you feel emotional and hurt you in some ways. But there's also like, I like that at least in this film version that there's something to lift you up and give you like some sense of maybe this is like our era too that we're living through right now, where I'm like, I feel like I can both grapple with the existential dread of, you know, losing everyone I love, and also I'm dying at some point, and also like trying to find meaning. And I often try to find meaning through like grounding myself in nature, or like experiencing these kinds of places and feeling something larger than myself, and like being like, I love the way that this story is telling something of like knitting together humanity, knitting together nature, and then also saying like all of us are a part of everything.
Oh man, it reminds me of that moment where you see the Earth, and he goes like, so that's us.
Is that us?
Like that.
Yeah, it's so
I
good.
love that moment. Yeah,
especially with all the Artemis stuff that we talked about not long ago and everything, and like it's just like it really does it gives you that feeling of infinitesimalism where you're like, it's like what is all this for? I don't know, but like let's try to grasp onto every moment we can, and like, you know, I don't know, like ride through the bad and the good, and
So it sounds like you're giving it to the film.
I'm gonna take the film,
Okay.
And I surprisingly,
No, I mean it doesn't surprise me. This was a good film. I really liked this. I just remembered one other scene I wanted to mention. The moment where we see him, it's like his decaying body. It's not gross, but it's just like he's in his bed, and we see the house has been like reclaimed by nature. I just thought that was really cool. It reminded me of The Last of Us a little bit, but also just like,
I could see that.
I like the reclaiming of a house, and like how quickly it becomes just kind of a part of the forest again. I just love that.
And it's like the boots, right? It's like the boots on the tree, where it's like even if that tree doesn't get cut down, those boots aren't going to last up there forever. But that tree,
it's that sense of like him returning to the world that he is a part of. Like despite all of this, despite all the trappings, it's like he is still a part of nature, right? And he's gone back to it.
And I find myself coming back to that other line of like, even the dead trees are just as important as the live trees and everything in the. I think that's really profound.
Because Claire mentions that, and this is from the book too, where it's like about how you can see it's amazing how fast everything's begun to grow, and like how life has returned after that fire. You wouldn't even know it happened, you know, like that kind of stuff. I thought it was really, really effective. Anyway, so I'm with you on the fence, man. I think we're both sitting on the same fence. I totally get going for the movie here. I think I'm going to take the book, maybe just to kind of represent that fence sitting.
Yeah.
And I'll give the caveat of I tend to like my stories perhaps a little more ambiguous, and maybe that's why I'm feeling a little more drawn to the book, while granting that I actually feel like I had a more stronger emotional connection to the film. That's why I want to say I do think these two are just really good to pair with each other. This is one where I highly recommend engaging with both in either order. I think would be powerful. I wouldn't want. And in fact, I like that I've seen this movie now. Like I think I got more from the book having seen this movie. So I don't want to I don't want to take away from that experience. But yeah, ultimately I'm going to give it to the book. But that feels right for this project to have a little bit of a split here.
I like that worked out.
Let us know in the comments, which one are you taking? Have you read the book? Did you like the film better? Did you like the book better? I'm curious to hear people's thoughts. And really on any of the stuff we talked about, we're always excited to hear from people. You can either leave those in the comments if you're on YouTube. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel and let us know in the form of a rating and review, perhaps, if you're on another app. We'd love to see your words that way. It's a good way to get the word out for the podcast as well.
Yeah, and also be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film.
And we have a Discord, which there'll be a link for in the show notes if you want to join us somewhere a little more secluded to have a conversation with our community. We have dedicated threads to each project. We have one for Train Dreams, so you can come on there and have a chat with us. We'd love to hear from you and see you in our Discord. If you listen to even one episode, you'd be welcome to join us. And also, if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we do have a Patreon. That's where you can do suggestions for us to cover. If you have like a certain adaptation you'd love to hear us dive into, that's the way to get it to us. That's where you can vote on polls for projects that come up, voted on by our patrons. And we also have bonus episodes on there that we release monthly. I should probably give the link, patreon.com/inktofilm.
Yeah, and thank you to Ross Bugden for these are our intro and outro music.
All right, man, that's going to be it for Train Dreams. Actually, don't know what we're covering next. We're gonna decide here in the coming days. We've got a bit of an opening, so I guess stay tuned. Some mystery project we're gonna settle on and do next. But that's going to be it for Train Dreams. It's it for Denis Johnson for now. I know he's got a couple other big books that I mean, big not in size, but in reputation, that I would be curious to see if they get adapted, because I'd love to return to him. He's an author I have a lot of fondness for. So this was a lot of fun and, like a sad one, but like a profound one. And I don't know, I love doing stuff like this every now and then. But yeah, we're going to have to leave it for now. So until next time.
Keep adapting.